Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Just Happened. I'm Christine Russo. Today, we welcome Teresa Stack Pearson. Teresa has served as CMO for major brands, the last of which was Hasbro. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's an interesting time for brand building. Culture is influencing decisions. What becomes an icon is different now, and the pace at which iconography happens, and then, of course, the burnout soon after. How do you feel about the way the branding industry in general has evolved?
I think that in general, just to speak about brand, I think, let's say 10, 15 years ago, your brand was one way and you never deviated. You were like, I only do it this way. I think what you're seeing now is because culture is so important, brands are more willing to do stretch projects and initiatives. So they're really branding, and brand developers and brand managers and brand strategists really need to be able to think outside the box these days. It is not a one-stop shop. You need to create the opportunity for brands to scale and expand.
That's really interesting because I wanted to talk to you about the balance between brand architecture, which I think would be something a little more like architecture. It's holding up the building,
Sure.
it's holding up the messaging, right?
Yep.
It's more formidable. And then also quick reactive. So you have proactive, which is the architecture, and then you have reactive, which is, oh, this is happening in social media. It's a trend, it's a meme. How much of our time and money should be dedicated to that? So one example of that is Punch the Monkey.
Yep.
And Crocs created a Jibbitz for it, which is a pretty quick turnaround for a very kind of probably short-lived meme, though we do love Punch.
Yes.
So where do you stand on that? What are your thoughts about that?
So Crocs and the Jibbitz, that's a manufacturing quick turn, easy to market, not a huge investment by them. So for them, that's something they can do. When you think about the larger brands, and if we were to just say in toy, jump on a trend, that trend would be almost literally impossible to jump on because the length of time it takes to develop product. I think the interesting thing is the larger brands tend to think about culture and cultural moments in a way where they can actually drive it through content. So we can do different things at different times. Not everything has to be a product offering. It could easily be a social play that still puts you in the conversation without you necessarily having to create a product off of it.
Actually, we see that with QSR. So we have Wendy's commenting on memes and trends and inserting themselves into the conversation without creating a Punch the Monkey milkshake that they have to,
Correct.
Everybody gets out. It's old.
Social teams that's part of social, right? You need to be able to get inserted into the conversation and have it make sense. The worst is if you try and do something that makes no sense for you whatsoever, then you look like you're jumping on a trend that doesn't even impact your audience in any way. It is something you have to think strategically about, but in larger IP, clearly social is the fastest way to do it. But Jibbitz, having dealt with Crocs on a product, I know how quickly they can get something like that to market.
Jibbitz is also really great because it skews younger, and the meme culture tends to skew younger. So that reactivity works with their audience. It makes me think about what Lego announced at CES, which is the interactive brick. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah. I thought it was brilliant to assert Lego. They are unique in themselves.
Yeah. So I was in the room when they launched it, and I cried. And I don't actually know why I cried, but other than I was like, wow, I wish I had kids that age that could enjoy this. We're a Lego family. My brothers and I grew up playing with Legos, and then my own kids, and they're grown. So a lot of some of the social media misunderstood what an interactive brick might be and route someone to an app or a website, and that's not it at all. It actually adds a layer, but the reason why I'm asking is because it could be it adds a layer of dynamic interaction. So the police car now has sirens going blue, okay? But the reason why I'm asking is because in some ways they have that flexibility to insert themselves into a dialogue, and they could do it through the brick and the sounds and the interactivity because it's changeable. What do you think about that?
I think that, listen, Lego knows how to create story. And I think this is a great combination of innovation and story. And kids today want more than just a brick. So they are playing into what is expected now. It isn't, if you don't evolve, then you're missing the boat. So what they're doing isn't the whole thing about driving kids to app. There's so many COPA compliance things that all toy manufacturers need to adhere to. This is really just about innovation and unlocking enhanced storytelling to engage the consumer.
Make a really good point, and that's the storytelling piece. And I think with something like Lego, there's so much nostalgia and fans that maybe that's where the pushback was, but there has to be evolution. What other examples do you think are out there or in your world that you did that worked well?
So I think there are many of things I've done as I think back. So number one is, I know you and I talked briefly before about content to commerce, and that's something maybe we'll talk about shortly. But in general, you start to realize the way kids are today, and you have to be able to think through that. So where content used to be kind of part of a process, it is now your storefront. So that is how you actually start to market your toys, and you do it through storytelling. So no different than what Lego's doing at the end of the day with the brick. So things are evolving, and yes, there are people who are the fans who grew up with the IP and they expect a certain thing, but the individuals who work at these companies, they study the data, they understand how consumers change, and they change so often, so fast, that these businesses need to know how to adapt to them. And I think what Lego did is great. I think for what I did at Hasbro, just a few things, we did a deal with Supreme. It was a really interesting opportunity for us to collab with a streetwear brand. It is not something that our youngest consumer would have understood, but our older consumer went crazy for it, and it sold out in 23 seconds. So a lot of these brands, and Lego is staying on that topic, and many of the Hasbro IPs and many IPs that I've worked on, they span many generations. So you are targeting and talking to multiple demographics. So what might be right for, just say, that core consumer who's 5+ isn't exactly what we would say is perfect for that 16, 18+ consumer, and so on.
Very interesting. Yes, I think there's easily 5 generations or maybe
100.
6. Yeah.
And how lucky are we, the people that have worked on IPs that span generations, to be able to market to multiple demographics, knowing their story arc of how they experience the brand is different than the next generation. So it gives us a lot to work with, and obviously unlocks a lot of opportunity when it comes to product and content.
Absolutely. And then when we think about, as you said, I did want to talk about, we're in the age of content to commerce and relevance. And for me, content to commerce is really, I think, TikTok. When I think of that, back in the day of a magazine print ad or a television ad, we were not thinking about it as content to commerce. It was advertising. And we can get into the semantics of it, but the broadness of content now, and I like how you put it, that it's the storefront. And so it's the storefront where you tell the story, it's entertaining, and then it drives curiosity and discovery and
Conversion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like, when we were using Nerf as an example, we developed something called Nerf Studios. So that specifically was content creators that reported directly into me. And the reason that was done is because we needed to produce a significant level of content. So to your point, content was the vehicle. We were no longer planning out campaigns with commercials that would take 15 storyboard reviews, scouting locations, large productions, and then you run it for a period of time when the media makes sense. That has switched significantly. So with Nerf Studios, we produce roughly 600 pieces of content on an annual basis. So we knew that was the critical component, and we just know how kids operate too. It's like, Not just kids. We're the same, right? You and I are the same. We're on our phone. We're on our phone. We see a piece of content. We like what's in there. We're likely going to click and buy that. And for consumers who are younger, they can't do that, but they can absolutely get their parents to click over and find out where that is. And that, I can tell you, Nerf saw tons of success with content to commerce. And that is us driving our own content. It is not us hiring. There's also the whole influencer route, which is also incredibly helpful when you have creators who also can be that content vehicle to drive conversion as well.
So that leads me to the flip side and something you've stood for, which is brand governance framework, which sounds a lot more strict and slower when it comes to creating content, but it creates scalability. So I'd like you to walk us through that. What do you mean?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we create something called a playbook, and that's not necessarily meant to police. It is meant to prepare. And in doing so, it allows a brand to scale. So an example would be any brand that I have worked on, we create the first kind of, just call it your brand book. And your brand book is your truth. It's what you stand for. It's your mission. It's your vision. It's your colors. It's your logos. And then we create something else called a franchise playbook. And that playbook is used by various partners within the organization. They can be regional players, they can be licensees, but everyone knows where the brand can go. And we also prepare the assets for the brand. So if we know that a goal of ours is to expand into footwear, we will already prepare what the footwear would look like. We're not waiting for those deals to happen. We're preparing for the full ecosystem out of the gate. And that allows us to not only navigate which categories to go into, it allows us to deal with partners when they're like, this is a quick hit and it's a quick win. Those are the tricky parts where you've got to say, is that quick win worth the risk? Or do we think that it's not worth the risk? And that's part of the governance. So it really is, it's a critical component to the success of any brand that wants to franchise out specifically into verticals outside of their core competency.
So we've seen the industry lean into different iterations of expansion. So you've got licensing, you've got franchising, and now you have a lot of IP purchasing and ownership. What are your thoughts on each of those individually? What have you seen work best?
So I'm a franchise person, so I will tell you that I think franchise development is one of the critical components to licensing. So I say that because of the fact that if a franchise isn't planned out, you're just licensing out the IP, and that could be a detriment to the value of the IP. So that's number one. As far as licensing out the IP, I think that is very common. It's very common in companies I've personally worked with. And that's really when it comes down to the operational expenses of that brand. Is it going to be easier? And can you sustain that brand and the equity and the potentially the opportunity for that brand if you license it out to someone who is going to take control of the IP and find the right partners to develop against it? But that still needs governance. You can't just give it away and expect that and hope that they're going to take care of that IP. I've seen that before as well. We give it to someone, and then if we want it back, we're going to need to make sure we haven't given it away and it comes back to us in a place that's not where it should be.
Notice we haven't spoken about AI this entire time. I think that's intentional. I feel like this conversation is really about the scalability, the brand development, the brand nurturing, and storytelling. However, one could argue that each of those can be enhanced with agentic or AI tools. I'm going to ask you what you think about that.
So I'm all for AI. I think AI is a great resource. That does not, in my opinion, take out all the creative that is needed in order to grow a brand, to develop a brand, to nurture a brand. All those human components have got to be part of the process because, again, AI can get you there faster, but I don't believe it replaces anything. And I think, like with all businesses, you have to be careful. You never want to fake it because that is not what you do. You just need to make sure if you need help in articulating it, that would be something that could be a benefit. But otherwise, I don't see anything coming out of AI that wouldn't come out of a creative resource I worked with. It's just, it is faster and it can be leveraged, but it shouldn't be the Bible.
Let's just lean into nostalgia. Nostalgia is huge. It's showing up everywhere. I think given that we're in very tumultuous times, there's a look back with warm feelings. That's maybe one of the contributors. Brands are leaning into it. Brands that were from the 90s, 2000s are reiterating themselves, are coming back. What are your observations about that?
I think when I think back in toy, a lot of times we leaned into nostalgia at monumental moments, whether it was the 50th anniversary or 70th anniversary. But as you said, nostalgia is much more common now. And the way I see it playing out is the fact that people want that emotional pull, something that reminds them of the past, the time that was maybe not as, like you said, as maybe challenging as some of the environments that we're living in. The other thing is nostalgia is a great thing to connect generations. So anytime something that comes out that's nostalgic, it could be a TV show, it could be a product. My own daughter will fall in love with it. Now that brings me closer to my daughter, an emotional connection, because she now loves something I loved. And that storytelling then can obviously cross over. So it is the emotional. I think people have to be careful that it's not a logo slap or the quick turn that's, oh yeah, I brought back this one product, don't you love it? That's not what people are looking for. They're looking for the emotional feeling around it. And that's why sometimes you have to think beyond just the product. What's the total offering to bring something back to market? But I think it's a fabulous thing. And I love that nostalgia is playing a critical role in commerce today.
I do want to ask you is the convergence of industries where you have fashion and entertainment, toys and movies, multi-dimensional ways to engage in a brand or in, I guess in a brand. That's not the word I'm looking for. In a banner, kind of in a banner. It's like a umbrella of experience. That is
called an ecosystem.
Yeah, an ecosystem, a brand ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the way media fans out, that's fanned out. It's never just, it's no longer just buying the one thing. You can even go to immersive events, etc. And Disney, of course, has been doing this for years and years, but now it's spreading. It's spreading across many different industries. What is your opinion of that?
It's the way things are now. And I think if you don't realize that, then you're missing it. Consumers, you're not going to get them just one way. You need to think of them coming in through various points. And Gap is a perfect example of, I've been following the Gap closely for at least a year and a half because I could see the exact same thing I had done in toy was being brought to the Gap. And in my experience, because I've worked in different industries, I knew fashion, I knew jewelry, I knew digital, I knew gaming, I knew product, and at the end, and I knew entertainment by the time I left Hasbro. These are all incredible components, and they are still one IP, but you need to be able to meet them at different touch points because at the end of the day, if someone's on their phone and they see a piece of content with a collab, and they all of a sudden now start to look at your brand differently, or you set up a membership program, or you have an event. Look at all the events being done by the Gap right now. They're using the press, their own press, so brilliantly that now people are starting to hopefully take notice that the days of hiring someone in one vertical, that's not today. Today, I was one of the first hires at Hasbro that was a non-toy hire. But at the end of the day, my hiring manager was just ahead of the curve. But I was able to unlock IP at Hasbro in a way many could not because of my background. I understood other categories of business. So I think it's a critical component. I think ecosystems are critical for any IP, and any IP that's just sitting to wait to launch another shirt, just say, is waiting, and they will be waiting.
I think we covered it all. I want to thank you. I appreciate
you.
all of your perspectives.
Thank you. All right, appreciate it, Christine.
Yeah,